Hi Seals, we are on chapter 9 and it's called Read Outside Your Comfort Zone. Okay, so remember Tilly was pleased that she spoke with Anne and Alice and that she may have some friends she could relate to. Okay, later that afternoon, long after Alice and Anne had returned to their own stories, Tilly laid out all her mum's books on the floor in her bedroom like jigsaw pieces from different puzzles. She was determined to try to work out at least a little bit of what Tilliness meant. Oscar's words about missing her mum circled around her head, and she was determined to find some proof that was more to what was going on than imaginary friends. Whatever it was, Anne's hand in hers had been absolutely real. Tilly studied the books laid out in front of her. They were by different authors from different publishers, and they were different ages and colours. There were adventures and romances, stories and pirates and princesses, and everything in between. If this is really happening, Tilly murmured, then there must be rules. There are always rules for this sort of thing. She looked for another book she'd already read and was drawn back again to A Little Princess. You could tell it was a favourite. The cover was coming away from the spine and there were several rips in the pages. Wondering if she needed to be back in the bookshop for whatever was happening to kick in, she headed downstairs to her reading corner and settled herself there. Right, here goes, Tilly said to herself, and opened the book at the first page. She read the first chapter, being sure to pay particular attention to all the details about the main character, Sarah, in case that helped. Then she put the book down and waited, but there was no sign of Sarah in Pages & Co. Okay, maybe I need to read more, Tilly thought, and she began to delve further into the book. But the best part of an hour and several circuits of the bookshop later, there was still no one matching the description of Sarah or any of the other characters in the book. Tilly tried books she hadn't read, books that were hers, books that were fresh off the shelves, but there was no one even slightly fictional to be found. She felt a strange mix of disappointment and relief that there didn't seem to be anything more magical than her imagination at play. Maybe Oscar had been right after all. Finally giving up, Tilly went to find Jack and flung herself dramatically into one of the cafe chairs, her head still spinning. All right, Tills, Jack called from behind the counter. That was quite an entrance. I keep telling you that if you stay cooped up in the shop all the time, it will start getting to you. Tilly blew her fringe out of her eyes in response. Hey, come here. I need some help. Tilly stood and shuffled her way over to see what Jack was concocting. Right, so these are going to be bear paw print brownies, he said, gesturing at a tray of gooey-looking chocolate brownies cut into squares. They're an ode to "We're going on a bear hunt." He held up a square of baking paper with the shape of a paw print cut out of the middle in a tiny sieve. So, I'll hold this template on each brownie, and you're going to shake some icing sugar through the sieve, and then hopefully we'll peel it off, and each one will have a sugar paw print right in the middle. Got it? I think so, Tilly said, taking the mini sieve and box of icing sugar Jack was holding. Jack carefully placed the template of the first brownie and nodded to Tilly, who tried to shake some icing sugar into the sieve. But far too much came out and ballooned up, making the air taste sweet around them. Jack grinned. Never mind, that's the test one. We can eat it later to check the brownies. Have another go, and maybe shake the box a little slower this time. Tilly gingerly shook the box, managing to get a light sprinkling of sugar through the sieve and onto a brownie. Jack peeled back the baking paper pattern and gave Tilly a triumphant high five, causing another icing sugar cloud. Who's your favourite book character, Jack? Tilly asked him as they worked. Ooh, tough question, Tills. And what do you mean by favourite? The character I like the most, or the character I think is best written? The character you'd most like to be able to have a real-life conversation with, Tilly replied. Oh, well, that's a slightly different question, Jack said. The character I'd most like to talk to, he paused and thought. I think I'll be very tempted to go with Long John Silver, the pirate from Treasure Island. Have you read that one? Tilly shook her head. I've seen the Muppet film version, though, she offered. Jack laughed. Well, I think Robert Louis Stevenson's original version is even better. Think of the stories Silver could tell of pirates and buried treasure. Imagine the debates you could have with him. He's a baddie, though, right? Tilly asked. Well, yes, I suppose, technically, but the baddies are more interesting sometimes, don't you think? Or the heroes aren't always very heroic. People who do the right thing for the wrong reasons or the wrong thing for the right reasons. People like Long John Silver. You should read the original." I was a bit put off by the idea of all the boats. I didn't like swallows and Amazons, Tilly said. It's not at all like swallows and Amazons. I reckon you'd enjoy it more than you think. I'm sure your granddad has a fancy way of saying you should read outside your comfort zone, and I agree with him. It was almost closing time, and they were still busy decorating brownies when a sharp cough alerted them to the fact that somebody else was there. "I'm so sorry," Jack said, looking up and smiling. "Just decorating brownies. Bear prints, you see? What can I get you?" The man standing in front of Jack did not smile back. He was tall and slender, and was wearing a pinstripe suit with a grey bowler hat. His grey tie was held in place with a finely wrought silver tie-pin in the shape of an old-fashioned key. In one hand he held a slim black notebook, and in the other a cane. "I am looking for Archibald Pages. This is his shop, is it not?" the man said abruptly. Jack, who was used to deal with occasional rude customers, smiled again. "If he's not at the front till, then he's probably at his desk. Is he expecting you?" "No," the man replied shortly. This is what the man might look like. "Tilly, why don't you see if you can find your granddad and ask him if he's free?" Jack said, and the man looked properly at Tilly for the first time. "You're Archibald's granddaughter?" he said, sounding surprised and staring at her intently. Tilly nodded. "How interesting," he said. "On second thoughts, let me find Archie for you, Mr. Jack paused, waiting for the man to supply his name. "Chalk. Enoch Chalk. And I can find my own way, thank you. I've been here before." He nodded and set off towards the stairs. Tilly gave an involuntary shiver as he left. "Goodness, I wonder what he wants with Grandad." "Oh, probably something boring to do with tax or such like. He looked like an accountant. Don't you think? Let's go on with the rest of these," Jack said. "I think I might go and see if Grandad wants a cup of tea," Tilly said. "I feel like he might need one." "Good idea, Tills. I'll get a pot brewing." Tilly didn't exactly mean to sneak up on them, but she did find herself particularly carefully and quietly, and staying out of sight of Grandad's desk. Mr. Chalk had made her feel rather strange, and she wanted to know what business he had with Grandad. By the time she reached the desk, their conversation was already heated. "There have been disturbances in the sources, Archibald. Things that few people would notice, which would not have escaped my attention." "Enoch, I don't know what you're talking about. You come barging in here talking about disturbances as though it was 10 years ago. I am not part of this anymore, and you know it." Tilly leaned closer to the bookshelf that she was hiding behind. "I know that you should not be part of this anymore, Archibald, but I know that you could never resist meddling in these things that didn't concern you, or turning a blind eye to those that should be dealt with. Enoch, have you not caused enough problems for me and my family that I have to endure you cropping up in my bookshop?" "Speaking of family, Archibald," but at that moment Tilly wobbled, and putting her hand out to steady herself, pushed several books out of the other side of the shelf, which rained down by the strange man's feet. I was just checking if you wanted a cup of tea," she tried to say calmly, as both men looked up at her, and she bent down to pick up the books and hide her red cheeks. "No, I am leaving," Chalk said, and with a long stare at Tilly, but without another word, he picked up his notebook and his cane and walked towards the stairs. "Who was he?" Tilly asked. Grandad's face was white. "I used to work with him a long time ago. We weren't the best of friends, as you could probably tell." "What did he mean about disturbances?" "Were you listening to our conversation, Tilly?" Grandad said sharply. "No, I just sort of overheard some of it as I was coming over to you. You know, ask you about the cup of tea." "That conversation was private and not for you to worry about. Chalk is an old colleague who I didn't see eye to eye with, but what's in the past is in the past, Tilly, and you shouldn't spend any more time thinking about it. Just a bit unexpected, that's all. Now, let's have that cup of tea you mentioned." They headed to the cafe in silence, but as Grandad picked up the cup of tea that Jack had poured, Tilly heard the china rattle as his hand shook, even if he did have what was nearly a smile on his face. Ooh, so we've been introduced to our first not very nice character, first mean character, haven't we? I wonder what business he had with Tilly's granddad. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Have a lovely, lovely weekend. Speak to you soon. Bye.